Will everyone please rise? Please be seated. Welcome, everyone, to this community of memory and hope, brought into being by so many shared memories and high regard for Robert Steller. Welcome to this time and place where we have gathered to acknowledge loss, to remember and to give thanks for Bob's long and vital presence among us. Today we will gather in the stories that will form a web of living memory that will be alive for as long as we remember. We are mindful of the many faith traditions that inform our individual journeys, and we hold in gratitude the foundations of love and service that those traditions have in common. And in keeping with the Unitarian Universalist tradition practiced at Church-Unitarian, we light this chalice with these words from the Reverend Jan Richardson. We light this chalice to honor the memory of those who have come before us, kindling flames of wisdom and beauty, illuminating the path before us. Now I would invite you to rise in body and spirit and to find in your the gray hymnals that are in your pew racks, hymn number 108, and we will be singing verses 1 and 2.
Good afternoon. I'm Chris, Bob's older son, and I have 4 very short readings from poetry. One of them is a complete short poem, and the others are excerpts. And the first is from a poem called A Song of the Rolling Earth by Walt Whitman from his book Leaves of Grass. And that was one of the books that we found on Dad's bedside table after he died. A song of the rolling earth and of words according. Were you thinking that those were the words, those upright lines, those curves, angles, dots? No, those are not the words. The substantial words are in the ground and sea. They are in the air. They are in you. Next is a poem called August from My Desk from a poet named Roland Flint. And the Flints were neighbors of my parents on 14th Avenue Southeast in Minneapolis. I think it was the second place my parents lived. It's a stretch of 14th that doesn't exist anymore. Van Cleef Park was expanded, and so it's under Van Cleef Park. But they knew the Flints and a retired English teacher named Elizabeth Jackson. My dad would talk about those days. August from my desk. It is hot today, dry enough for cutting grain, and I am drifting back to North Dakota, where butterflies are all gone brown with wheat dust, and where some boy, red-faced, sweating, chafed, too young to be dying this way, steers a laborious, self-propelled combine and dreams of cities and blizzards and airplanes. With the white silk scarf of his sleeve, he shines and shines his goggles. He checks his meters, checks his flaps, screams contact at his dreamless father, and engines roaring, he pulls back the stick and hurtles into the sun. You know, I like this poem a lot. I almost didn't pick it because of the dreamless father line. This farthest thing from Bob. He was quite dreamy. The next poem is by a poet that he mentioned a lot. He I think, was more and more interested in poetry as he grew older. And it's Elizabeth Bishop. She's a 20th century poet. This is from her poem called Questions of Travel, from a book called Questions of Travel. He mentioned Questions of Travel a lot, and I don't know if he was talking about the book or the poem, honestly, but this is a bit of the poem. But surely it would have been a pity not to have seen the trees along this road, really exaggerated in their beauty, not to have seen them gesturing like noble pantomimists robed in pink. The last bit of a poem is from a poet named Bill Holm. And Bob also had a book by Bill Holm on his bedside table. That book was called Bach's Elderbug Variations. It's a little bit based on the Goldberg Variations. It's poetry and prose and a little bit of music. And all those poems are about Bach's elderbugs. So we looked at another book. And I just want to mention that Bill Holm was another poet that Bob knew personally. Bob taught at Lakewood Community College, taught English for many years, and Bill Holm was an artist in residence there, and Bob got to know him quite well there. And Bill Holm is from Minneota, Minnesota, of Icelandic extraction. Here's the poem from Letting Go of What Will Not Be Held Back. The dying do their own work with tidiness, just the right speed, sometimes even a little satisfaction. So quiet down, let them go. Practice your own song now.
Well, as we are all well aware, Bob Steller died on April 30th of this year, 4.5 months ago now. The acute sense of surprise and sudden loss has been tempered by the healing touch of time. A good man, a long and productive life. His death was not so much a tragedy as the natural ending of a rewarding journey, as well as an opening for those of us who remain in life to reflect not only on what was known and unknown about Bob's journey, but for reflection on the journeys still unfolding in his wake. We cannot know another person's heart or intention, but we can know the impact of their being, even as any of us here will somehow and in some time be known and understood or misunderstood by our own impact. In the annals of pop psychology, I remember the posters that remind us to be humans being instead of humans doing. Or that's human beings instead of human doings, right? Bob seemed to have the capacity for both. The stories and reflections on his life have surfaced in this time since his death are filled with this man's doings. Teaching, reading, mentoring, gardening, supporting, and so much more. And woven through is the affirmation of his deep listening presence, his curiosity that are hallmarks of human being. From the stories of his sons who experienced him in life and have come to know him in new ways since his death, from the books he read and kept close, from the stories he shared, and from the diverse and colorful tapestry of his life, we can see that web of connections that carry that same sense of human being deeply immersed in the fullness of this earthly life. The day before Bob died, I went to the hospital to spend some time in his peaceful presence. He was not conscious. I knew Bob mainly from the series of visits and planning sessions with him and Chris over the several weeks that led to Judy's memorial service. Who knew that such planning could be so engaging and filled with life, resulting in a sense of treasured connection? I will remember those conversations for as long as I am alive. While I was there that day, Chris came and we sat together. We spoke of father loss. We shared the experience of having loving and influential fathers, mine gone some 30 years, his hovering gently on the threshold of death. And I shared my most lasting reflection of the day that my father died. He was 86. He died quietly of Parkinson's disease in a place many miles from where I was. We got the news late at night, and my son, who was 12, and my daughter, who was 14, were awakened by the sound of the phone and joined me and my husband in our bedroom where we told stories of Grandpa. In the morning, my son came to me. "I was worried about you last night," he said. I was certainly not aware that my reaction to the news had elicited behavior that would cause worry. "Why?" I said. "I was worried about how you'd feel about being an orphan." "Oh, Bob," I said, "when parents do a good job of raising their children, they give them everything they need to live without them. Grandpa was a really good dad, and I got more than I needed from him a long time ago. Everything else has been a bonus. We will miss him, but we will be okay. I have everything I need, and I can only hope that this will be true for you. Chris and Tim, you will miss Bob. You are okay. You got everything you needed." This is how we are remembered. From the gifts of our being in this life, from the ways in which we leverage the privilege of education and connection and class and race, from the generosity of spirit with which we grace the world, from the graciousness of presence that lives beyond our children and our friendships. Look around you here. Know that your presence, each one of you here today, is a testament to the power of a single presence in this life. Let us pray. Holy One, who holds us gently as we pass in and out of this earthly life, we offer a prayer of thanksgiving for the multitude of blessings that grace this hour. We give thanks for the warmth of supportive family and friends who have come from many places to offer care to each other in loss and shared memory. In this time of the waning of summer, we remember Bob's appreciation of the natural world and the cycles of life and death and rebirth, and pray that his spirit has found its place among the forces that create and uphold life. May all who have known him continue to carry the legacy of his generous and welcoming spirit, his love of beauty, and his abiding warmth and wisdom. In love and gratitude, we pray. Amen.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. I know Chris and I and the whole family really appreciates it, and also to those of you who are looking remotely on the live stream from elsewhere in the world. We're here to honor Bob Steller, our dad. Chris is my dad, a friend and a family member to all of you, and a kind, exuberant human being. When we were kids, our dad sometimes took us out scavenging. That's what he called it. Scavenging meant driving to nearby industrial areas and to railroad tracks, to empty places where there might be interesting, discarded stuff. Looking back, it was a weird way to spend a Saturday morning. After all, there were cartoons on. We rarely found much to interest me. I just liked exploring. But once we came across a pile of black wooden bricks. We loaded them into the back of our Datsun station wagon and took them home. And over time, we used those bricks to build a nice patio in our backyard, in the backyard of our house on 7th Street Southeast. Bob Steller may have been a hard-nosed and broken-nosed, often, lineman on the football field when he was in high school and college. You could see that on his face if you look carefully. But in the rest of his life, he used his senses and imagination to explore and embrace the world. When a person gets pleasure out of found objects like Bob did, you know that's someone who can get joy from life and who can give it too. Imagine a house where the father walks around on his hands while the mother expertly plays Schumann on the piano. That's how I imagine life on West Worcester Street in Bowling Green, Ohio, in the 1940s. Bob's brother Dave, who is here, can confirm if that's how it really was. Their father, Warren, was a powerful athlete who became a baseball coach and athletic director at Bowling Green State University. Their mother, Marion, who we knew as Grandma Dee, was a music teacher. They married late for the time. Bob was born when his mom was 36 years old. In 8th grade, Bob met Judy Bavis, a fellow Bowling Green kid, in science class. Soon after, they formed a bond that lasted until they died. But they didn't stay together and work so well as a couple because they were alike. Judy had strong opinions. Bob had measured ones. Judy had harder edges. Bob had softer ones. Judy strived to get things done. Bob enjoyed things as he found them. Of course, they shared plenty. They had to build a life together. A love of travel, of gardening, of music, of bringing outsiders into their homes. Another characteristic that united them was very thick hair. You might have noticed they passed it on to Chris and me. Together, here, Bob and Judy found a new love. After 1960, when they moved to Minneapolis for graduate school, this place gradually became home. They had intended to move back to Ohio after coming here, but they settled in, they dug in to life here. This isn't a pun on shoveling snow, though they did their share of shoveling. They dug deep into the community, into Southeast Cooperative Nursery School, into singing in local choirs, joining Unity Church, and going to the St. Paul Chamber Orchestra. Bob would take us down to the Mississippi River to explore when it was still a bit of a no man's land down there where you didn't know what you were going to find. In fact, for most of their adult lives, that river was a presence. When they got involved in a cause or a campaign, Bob and Judy would often huddle together, composing letters and papers. Bob, ever the wordsmith, was always entertained by the local kids' lingo. We would say brang instead of brought, and come over to your house instead of go over to your house. And of course, we would say literally. We said that literally all the time. Bob mentioned these things, cataloged them, and corrected us without correcting. We learned to notice and love language from him. He delighted in us, his children, in other people's children, and of course, his grandchildren. At their house on East River Road, Bob showed the grandkids how clothes ended up in the basement when you put them down the laundry chute. Stuffed animals soon followed clothes down the chute. He took the kids to the backyard to pick raspberries. He gazed at wedding dresses in a shop window, if that's what the kids wanted. Okay. Just a sec. Dad sometimes told the stories that he taught or that his students wrote in his English classes at Lakewood Community College. One student, who was a veteran, wrote about being a sniper in a tree for days. In another story, passing aliens who needed a spare part started life on Earth and then waited quietly for us to develop enough intelligence to make the spare part for them. We humans don't have that kind of time. Bob almost didn't have even as much time as he got. He nearly drowned when we were vacationing in California once, smashed into the ocean bottom by a wave and rescued by a nearby swimmer named Jesus. He had a heart attack at age 59 and later had open heart surgery. But he went on amazingly strong, sharp, and organized, always tending to his lists on Post-it notes, ingredients, books, plants. Bob took care of Judy for years toward the end as her Alzheimer's disease progressed. It was an exhausting task for Bob. Finally, in June last year, we moved Judy to memory care. Bob was untethered. He went to museums and concerts. He read poetry and took lifelong learning classes. After Judy died in December, he mourned. He missed her and their life together deeply, but he also felt freed to travel. In March, he spent 3 weeks in Tucson at my house. On his birthday, we attended a lecture at the University of Arizona, and that night it snowed hard like it does in Minneapolis. We took hikes a couple of miles long in the desert mountains, and he attended the Tucson Festival of Books, always a highlight of Bob and Judy's winters there. We were making plans for the future until that day in late April. He was walking to a class at the Minneapolis Institute of Art when he fell down, stricken by one condition or another. Maybe people shouldn't be surprised when somebody dies at age 87, but when the reality set in that Bob would, we were shocked, dumbfounded. We felt robbed of time, of course, but we can't be greedy. We had so many great decades with Bob, and we were left with so many memories, inheritances, and reminders of him. They fill us. They also fill 2 units at All-American Self-Storage over on Pelham Boulevard here in St. Paul. If anyone is looking for a side table, you know where to find it. Back in 2021, Chris and I were consolidating Bob's 2 storage units at All-American. I lifted a large office box that felt strangely empty. Inside, I found a large, gnarled piece of tree root. This ticked me off a little bit. Keeping that stuff is why we had 2 units to consolidate in the first place. Bob explained that he had found the root and liked it. He thought it was beautiful. He was thinking he would put it out someday to display it. That's why he kept it. This is the Bob, the dad, the grandpa that we mourn and celebrate today. We are sorry not to have more time with him, but so grateful for the curious, loving person he was and the time we had. Thank you.
So it's a tradition at Unity Church to share submitted memories at this time in the memorial service. Many of what we will share today are excerpts of longer entries which we'll share in their entirety with the family. Jack Rossman, longtime friend of the Stellers, will share in this reading. From Deborah Steller, Bob's niece. It is family lore and likely Twin Cities lore that Bob and Judy met when they were young, fell in love, and were happily married for 63 years until Judy's death last year. This always seemed daunting for our sons and nieces and nephews to live up to as we navigated our relationships. Judy once told me, "Take it from someone that married their childhood sweetheart. You should date lots of people and experience everything that life has to offer." And then she added, "Not everyone is as lucky as me."
From friend Bill Rue. In the 1950s, Bob and I lived with a small group of friends in a rooming house at Oberlin College. During much of our careers, we lost contact, but reconnected a few years ago when a few of us decided to get together. We met with our wives for a reunion on Cape Cod. Bob and Judy were founding members. When COVID made travel impossible, we shifted to Zoom and began meeting every other week, which we did for the last several years. Bob's insistent curiosity meant he always had something interesting to say on so many subjects. Beyond his solid intellectual skills, Bob was one of the kindest and most decent people I have ever known. He was a role model of quiet competence that I will not forget.
From Livia Lund, Bob's granddaughter. To me, the quality that made Bob unique was that he was a very present person. An active listener, he was ready to meet you where you were with a gentle curiosity that made conversation relaxed and open. When I would swing by his apartment with treats from my bakery job, our chats danced from my plans for the future to politics to why he decided to shave his mustache off all those years ago. While generational gaps can sometimes feel hard to bridge, Bob always felt like he was right there with you, especially when it came to trading tips about the best Trader Joe's snacks, a favorite topic of young people. It should be noted that his track record on Easy Connection goes beyond family and friends, and indeed were held by his students. Despite lightly complaining about the amount of reading assignments, one 5-star review on ratemyprofessors.com described Professor Steller as a great teacher who was very approachable and compassionate.
From Ann Sunt. Bob Steller was my husband's best man, literally and figuratively. Ed and I were fortunate to enjoy his friendship for more than 60 years, cherishing the occasional visit at his home or ours. Kind, non-judgmental, generous, interesting, and interested, Bob brought joy.
From Shelley Butler. I had the privilege of working with Bob on Cairns, the Unity Arts Journal, for several years, and he was a joy. In the middle of a meeting once, he asked, "You know, the moment of silence in the service, do you ever find yourself counting the reredos?" He loved the reredos, or perhaps more accurately, was fascinated by it and wanted to talk to the architect about the creation of it. Another time he asked me, "Have you ever looked up behind the reredos?" I hadn't, so we went into the sanctuary and laid down on the chancel floor and looked up at the structure of it and took pictures. His enthusiasm for almost anything was infectious, and I have new appreciation for several things, not just the reredos, because of him.
From Ruth Palmer, Director of Music Emerita. Bob and I had a running joke between us due to my continual misspelling of his name. I seem never to let go of spelling it Steller with the ending AR instead of ER, thus always sending commendations of praise to him. Bob, with his low chuckle and humor, gently reminded me he did not feel worthy of receiving this recurring, noteworthy recognition. He did, however, prove over and over again with his beautiful spirit, longtime dedication to family, friends, and Unity Choir that Steller, Stellar, was indeed the correct spelling. My gratitude to him for so many years of support of art, beauty, and music.
From Tony Shostak. I am saddened by the passing of Bob Steller. I only just found out today. He was one of the early members of the men's retirement group. He was smart and kind and a real asset to our group. I will miss him.
From Dale Howie. I always knew Bob from his kind and quiet, positive presence, always ready with a smile. He will be missed.
And from Gene Kumaro to Bob's kids. He was about the best listener I've ever known. He listened quietly, sometimes cocking his head a bit with just a slightly crooked smile and twinkling eyes, especially if he enjoyed what he was hearing. He would follow up with great questions that showed he really understood and that also demonstrated his great curiosity and his interest to the people and the world around him. He was incredibly well-read and well-versed in many topics and genres. He was a phenomenal partner to your mother. She was more outgoing one, and it seemed to me that her career took precedence time-wise. He enjoyed learning about your mother's field and supporting it in every way that he could. He would accompany her to professional meetings and take great interest in the topic himself. And she provides this short poem by Czeslaw Milosz, Milosz. Not that I want to be a god or a hero, just to change into a tree, grow for ages, not hurt anyone.
From Marty and me, losing Bob is like losing the warm, comfortable blanket in our lives.
This we know. All life is a gift. Bob Steller's life was a gift. His love of music found expression in his life, in his life with the Unity Singers music program, as well as the lyrics and melodies that moved through his daily life. His curiosity and intelligence shone through his ability to engage in lively and interesting conversation, as well as his capacity to make learning accessible and interesting to a wide variety of students. His attention to beauty and nature brought forth gardens that brought joy to many, both through his own gardening and his support and encouragement of others. His attentive presence and genuine care and regard attracted and sustained long and mutually satisfying friendships and created bonds of chosen kinship across generations. Delight and literature went deep and served as a source of living inspiration. Bob's unique expression of those gifts will be missed, and we can all honor his memory best by our own expression of his rich legacy. In the days ahead, in his honor and in gratitude for the time left in our own lives, may each of us sing, alone or with others, and feel the healing power of music. Lead with curiosity, suspending judgment and opening space into new learning or understanding. Lean into the beauty of a garden and let it fill the sad and dark places of a weary soul. Strengthen an old friendship or welcome a stranger with an act of trust or generosity. Host a gathering to celebrate family, friendship, love, and gratitude, and drink a toast to the living memory of Bob Steller, who remains among us as we extend these gifts into the future. And now, as we go forth carrying the memory of Bob Steller, may the peace which passes understanding, which the world can neither give nor take away, be and abide with you all. After the postlude, the family will exit into the parish hall, and the rest of you can go out the back and come in, and they'll be ready to greet you and share in refreshments.
Be careful about advisors in that school.
Across from Van Cleef Park.